Human beings become wallpaper to coyotes. So one of the factors leading to human conflict includes human acceptance or indifference of coyote presence. So can you guys see the coyote in this photo? Yeah. Can you see the people in this photo? Yeah. Does anyone see what's wrong with this photo? And then the coyote's just like 10 feet away and everybody's just ignoring everybody. We watched this as researchers and we were appalled. We're like, oh my gosh, this is not safe. This is not a safe situation. But yet, at Crown Hill, everybody had just come to accept the coyotes were like rock stars. It was like, hey, you know, they're here, we're here, it's all good. We watched a guy run right past one. The coyote sat down at the intersection and the guy ran past it. And I just, because that's all kinds of bad could happen from that. So, the wallpaper effect. One possible solution is training. So train the coyote and train the human. So we want to train the coyote through aversive conditioning, and we want to train the human, hey, when you see a coyote, this is what you should do. First of all, a lot of people, and especially if you're a park ranger, you question the ability for adults to change behavior, okay? Because as we make contacts in the field and we try to educate people about things like the leash law, closures, we get people constantly telling us, hey, I don't care, just write me the ticket, I'm going to keep doing the same thing. Okay, so the other thing is researchers question, does this really work with coyotes? Is this really a viable solution to conflict? So these are the things we wanted to look at. So coyote hazing, this is a deliberate conditioning. So many of you, if you have pets at home and you're trying to keep them out of a certain area, you probably use hazing techniques. Anybody use anything like a squirt bottle to keep cats off the counter, or clapping your hands at the dog when it comes in the kitchen? So if you do that, you're already used to hazing. That's what this is. And it is by definition not harassment. So harassment is intent to harm and intent to hurt. And that is not legal in the state of Colorado. So I want to make it very clear that hazing, there's no intent to hurt the animal. You shouldn't hurt yourself. We do have people that have hurt themselves hazing. I tripped over a log. It's like, come, pay attention, okay? I hit myself in the face. I accidentally sprayed myself with the stuff. We had one guy hospitalized because he tried to pepper spray the coyote and had the spray facing the wrong direction. Got himself in the face. So these, when you're choosing your hazing tool, make sure it's one you actually won't hurt yourself with, okay? And we'll get into that. So hazing is not harassment, and sometimes even researchers will interchange those words. In the state of Colorado, harassment is illegal, so do not use that word. You can say I'm annoying, or I'm scaring, or I'm conditioning the coyotes. Don't say you're harassing them. So the question is, she's at South Table, there's a coyote den up the hill. Remember back to my statement, if the coyote's behaving normally and is doing normal coyote things and is like hanging out at the den, you don't need to haze it. If it's in your backyard touching noses with your cat through the glass window, you need to be hazing the living daylights out of that coyote. So it's very contextual, okay? All right, and that's where it gets hard, because hazing's not black and white, for sure. All right. Challenges. There's a lot of challenges with hazing. On the coyote side, are coyotes too smart for hazing? Coyotes are very intelligent animals. Do they figure out who's doing the hazing and who is not? Yes, they do. So I got to the point in Aurora where my truck showed up, they all disappeared. I didn't see a coyote like the entire last year of my career, because they all knew who I was and they all knew I was going to haze the living daylights out of them. Does hazing have a lasting community-wide effect? So in other words, if a few people in the community are doing it, does that make a difference for the whole community? And lastly, and I believe very strongly in this last one, if you know how to haze and you get into a hinky situation like I did with 3 coyotes in the dark at the golf course with my dog, it gave me a tool to protect me and my dog and create a zone of safety so I could get out of that. Is that important? Yes. Absolutely. So if you use hazing for no other reason than to be safe, I'm all for it, okay? But we'd like you to try it for other things. Also on the coyote side, if you can see this, here's a coyote sort of hanging out right next to the trail. This was our bad actor at Crown Hill in 2014. It would sit about 3 feet off the edge of the trail and attack dogs on leash in the middle of the day. Is that okay? No. Nobody's dog was killed. All the people whose dogs were grabbed, they used hazing to get the coyote to let go, but the coyote, as they were trying to haze it, would erect the hair on the back of its neck, bare its teeth. These are all indications that this is a bad actor. And so we ended up having Parks and Wildlife come in and remove a coyote at Crown Hill because of this behavior. All right, I hope everybody can see that line where this is an animal who's gone to the dark side. We don't understand why. We don't know where that comes from. We'd love to be able to figure that out as researchers. But those are animals that can't really be reconditioned through hazing. All right, so hazing has its limits. Does that make sense to everybody? At Bear Creek Park, she mentioned there's been signs of live animal trapping. That's so we can put radio collars on them. So they don't just come over and let you put the collar on them. You have to, I know that's shocking. It's a good, and I'm not saying that out of anything other than just, you have to explain this to folks because you put out padded leg hold traps, or a snare. They get in the trap, you sedate them, and you put the collar on them, and then you let them go. And that's how we got that data that I showed you earlier with the data points in the map. We collect other data, temperature, weight, all that kind of stuff. Question was, the cage is only made operable if somebody's there. We usually don't use a cage to trap coyotes because they're too smart. They won't go in a cage. We use a leg hold trap or we use a snare. And it is hooked up to a device that when the trap goes off, I get a text on my phone. If Rob was participating, he gets a text, and we all respond to the site to help the animal so it's not sitting there in the trap overnight. It's a really slick system, unless you're the person responding, because you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, it's 1:15 and my phone went off. But you need to respond immediately. Okay, so does that make sense? Yeah, pretty cool stuff. All right, challenges on the human side. People hate the word hazing. They're like, that's a terrible word. That reminds me of people doing horrible things to each other in high school or college. Also, I find this interesting. People say things like, I'm uncomfortable with yelling and clapping my hands out loud in public. Really? Have you never been to a concert? Or we have this guy who's a grown human being dressed as a devil running down the street in bike races, and yet we have people saying, I'm too embarrassed to haze. I don't know what to do with that. What if not everyone's willing to haze? And it's also very difficult. This study was very difficult to design because it's hard to isolate, human behaviors and what the impacts are. So, and then what's really cool is some people are completely cooperative. We put up a sign that said, there's coyotes in the area. Please consider, using your voice and yelling. This woman's freaking carrying a baseball bat. She is ready, okay? And I love her because not only are coyotes going to leave her alone, but I'm pretty sure everyone is, all right? I'm like, yeah, you just walk down the trail with that baseball bat. So, study design. The overall goal is to get this guy who's rocking a pair of Daisy Dukes to basically haze coyotes. So that was our goal. We're going to take the regular person, not the agency person, but the regular person, get them to haze coyotes. And then say to people, this is repeatable. You can try this too on your land. Good luck. All right, so citizen science, 207 volunteers. Rob was one of them, attended a 2.5-hour training. We taught them about hazing, when to haze, and how to measure a coyote's response to hazing. We had everything from -4, where the coyote runs like heck, to the next county after you haze, to 1, the coyote approaches after input. So you can see it's a scale, all right? So we asked the volunteers after you haze, rate how the coyote responded. 0 meaning no change in behavior, all right? So this is an example. Response code -4. The coyote completely leaves the area after you haze. Rock star, gone. All I see is a fanny and some feet, all right? Response code 2, probably many of you have seen this in urban environments. You haze the coyote, and what it does is it runs more than 10 feet away, and then it stops and looks back. How many of you have seen that response? That's pretty typical urban coyote response. So that's a -2. That's sort of a, but at least the coyote got away from you, and that's the goal. Response code 0 is there's absolutely no change in behavior. So you haze, and the coyote just stands there and looks at you, okay? And that's happened to me. And then this is response code 1, coyote approaches after input. So this is a jogger, and they're actually in violation. It's 10:48 p.m. This trail closes at 10, so shame on you. And this is what happens when you violate the law, all right? You get chased by a coyote. So that's his head right there, and the coyote's following him.
They're supposed to chase him after?
Right, exactly. This is how we do enforcement now. No, I'm just kidding. So that gives you a sense of -4 to 1, okay? So again, these folks like Rob, and are there any other Coyote Watch volunteers in the audience? People that went through the training and helped out? So we said, okay, you're going to haze the coyote, you're going to tell us how it responds. We had 739 observations, and of those, 13% of the time, the volunteer felt like it was an appropriate situation to haze coyotes. And here's what we found out. First of all, we wanted to know what methods did people use. This should be somewhat unsurprising. What was the most popular method for hazing? Voice. Why?
Collar.
You always have it with you.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't need the bat utility belt to pull out your voice. Okay, you just got it with you. The noise is, and you're like, what's the difference between voice and noise? Noise means you used like a can of pennies, or you had an air horn or something like that. So that's noise. Approach is you actually took 1 or 2 steps at the coyote, or in my case, you run at it, screaming like a crazy woman. So that's approach. Body is you're using your arms or some sort of lunge. And then other, we had all sorts of things like I threw a bag of poo at it, I shook a bag of potatoes, my iPhone went off. So these are things that were really interesting reading those categories. One guy said he squealed like a moose, which I thought was interesting. And the coyote also he got a 0 response out of that. So choose your noises. You don't want to sound like an injured rabbit, okay? That's a bad noise. But what I encourage people is use your voice, and use your voice powerfully, because you're always going to have it with you. I had a 0 response to a coyote hazing incident. I was planking, okay? Does everyone know what planking is? So I was at Ector's, and I was exercising in the parking lot, and I was planking, and I noticed a coyote standing about 20 feet away from me. Why do you think a coyote would be standing about 20 feet away from me while I'm doing this? It thinks I'm insane, right? Yeah. So I'm planking, and I'm trying to stay planked, and so I yell at it from this position. And what did it do? Nothing. It stood there and stared at me like, really? And so I was like, dang it. So I got it from my plank, and I was like, get out of here! And then it took off to the edge of the parking lot, into the darkness, and I saw it turn and look at me after it got beyond the street lights. But that's the difference I'm talking about. Is me shouting from this down position. First of all, I was completely confused, like, aren't you a 2-legger? What are you doing? But then second, it wasn't forceful enough. Most of our volunteer hazers combined techniques. I combine voice, noise, and body. That's my favorite combination, because you always have all 3 of those. This is really cool, hazing response. So this is the overall results of the hazing response. So you can see the most common response was -3, which is that the coyote doesn't completely leave the area. It's not in the next county, but it leaves the area, and it may look over its shoulder as it's doing it. It's not like, ooh, but it's kind of doing one of these, but it's leaving the area. So that was the most common response. So what does that tell us? If a person tries hazing, does it generally work?
I would say so.
Generally, yes. We had some where it didn't. Okay, we've got one where it actually approached after somebody hazed. But generally speaking, we had a -3 response, which is a pretty good outcome. What's interesting is the domestic dog effect. So when we started to look at the data and we brought in, was there a dog present or not, 42% of the time there was a dog present, which I think is really interesting. If you think about that, our volunteers, when they found a reason to haze, a lot of times there was a dog with them. Duh. Because what are dogs to coyotes? It's a magnet, right? So dog walkers are the ones that have a lot of coyote conflict. So the presence of a dog impacted the hazing. With no dog present, remember, -3. As we add a dog, look what happens. So here's no dog in our results. Once you add the dog in, what happens?
They're more aggressive.
The dark color is with dog present. So basically what it did is it muted the response all the way across.
That's interesting.
Not surprising. How many people have I had tell me I hazed the coyote and it did nothing? And the thing you need to remember is if you have a dog with you, you need to have different expectations about what's going to happen when you haze. You may just be creating a zone of safety. You may not get that coyote to go to the next county, okay? So I think that's really interesting stuff. And I think it builds more realistic expectations for people that, hey, if you have a dog with you and you haze, that coyote's not going to go to the next county. It's probably just going to take a little distance, just like you described, particularly if there's a den nearby and some other circumstances. We evaluated the program. We actually had a master's student interview our citizen scientists and ask them, has it changed anything? A couple things we learned, that by having these citizen scientists do this, it obviously decreased the knowledge gap between the public and the experts. It also increased people's ability to feel like, hey, I can handle this. As a community, we now have a handle on this, this conflict thing, which I thought was really cool. Also, they gained new knowledge, so they understood more about coyote biology and behavior. They understood their role in human-wildlife conflict. They had some changes in tolerance for management strategies. So in other words, people became more understanding of why we do go out and shoot coyotes when we have a bad actor. And it decreased the perception of risk, and obviously people were more likely to try hazing. It also created a lot of empowerment. People were more confident. They were posting on Facebook and social media and telling all their friends. So this program, by research, by looking at how people responded and changes in attitudes and belief, had a positive effect on conflict management. So should you do citizen science? Yes, that's what this is telling us, all right? Next, we have this interesting intersection where the coyote is now heading from the dirt road onto the trail at Crown Hill. And last, I'm going to finish up with our Crown Hill and our Belmar, and where we actually asked just regular people, not citizen scientists, so these are sort of unengaged park visitors, to do the same thing. Hey, will you haze a coyote? All right, so real quick, we had hazing treatment sites where we asked via signs, hey, if you see a coyote, will you haze them? So this is what we put out. We actually had a QR code. If you don't know how to haze, there's a video you can watch. We put out these color sandwich boards. So we did nonverbal education. The hazing video, we now have 36,606 views of our hazing video. And yes, that's a guy drinking a beer in the background. So it's not a typical government PSA video. It's actually pretty funny. But again, if you put something out on the internet, expect people to diss you for it. So we have some people saying, if you live in an area with coyotes, watch this. We have the person who felt like it was a totally lame video and they didn't learn anything at all. So then what we did is, after we did the treatment, so we had everything out, the signs, the education, all that out for 2 weeks, and then we did a survey afterwards. So after the treatment, we asked people about what they thought. So public feedback. What's always fun about doing a survey is the long answer section, sort of the fill in the blank. So this is what people told us. First of all, what the hell, this is absurd and cruel. I'm sending a notice to PETA and all local animal rights groups immediately that you will cease and desist this inhumane experiment. I think you're wrong. I like the coyotes. When I read that one, I was like, I like coyotes too, gosh. And then some hating, we had hazing clinics and people defaced our signs. Leave them alone. So really interesting. Again, this is human social science. This is fascinating stuff, right? Confusion. What in the world does haze mean in relation to a coyote? Why do they want us to haze coyotes? Seriously, is this a proven effective way to deal with the problem? And what's the problem? Because again, it was Crown Hill. Everybody was just hanging out together. What's the big deal, right? Alternate theories. These are hilarious. So in my experience, the hazing tends to make coyotes more aggressive. The best way to control them is to reduce their population. What do we know about that? Kind of tricky. We do not need we do not need to publicly fund a coyote study. It's obvious what has happened. Lakewood City Council invited this by providing a smorgasbord of chickens. We now have coyotes roaming the neighborhood at all hours. It's unsafe to walk the streets for fear of being attacked. It's the chicken coyote theory I bring you from the city of Lakewood. As far as, and this is my favorite one at the bottom, as far as I know, coyotes only act aggressively in Boulder, Colorado. Really? I have to tell you, I read all this stuff at home, and I had a glass of wine, and this was like one of the best nights of my life. Because you're just like, wow. Another one, general opportunity event. I hate coyotes, period. They're too big a predator to be tolerated in a city. It's hard work keeping my cat inside by fear for his life if he escapes. He's tearing up my furniture and peeing on the carpet in frustration of being kept indoors all the time. Wow, that was an overshare. But that showed up on the survey. Relocate or kill coyotes that get too close to humans. People just want to walk their dogs and otherwise enjoy the park with their families, not be asked to train coyotes. So this is a person saying, don't ask me to do it. You just kill them and solve the problem. All right? They're a pest. They roam the surrounding neighborhood every night, kill dogs, cats, and yes, chickens, and are a hazard to small children. My favorite of all, the majority of dog owners that I've seen at the park are morons. Countless owners take their dog up to play with the coyotes. Can you put up signs encouraging people to haze stupid dog owners? And when you put this comment up in a room full of rangers, we say, yes, immediately, let's put those signs up. So again, what's interesting about doing something like this is you get the gut reactions from people, and you learn a lot from these comments. Like, the word hazing just doesn't work. People don't like it. It's offensive. People are offended by asking to help out with the situation. You, government employees, should fix this for me. Dog walkers are morons. Great. This is all excellent feedback. Chickens, City of Lakewood, their chicken thing, they should never have done that, right? Just like children are dying because of chickens. No, it's really funny to read all these comments. So, here's the rub, our survey results. This is really interesting. While the signs were up, did you see a coyote at Crown Hill? Majority of people, no. So the purple is 75% or so of the people said, I did not see a coyote while the signs were up. Next question, if you saw a coyote while the signs were up, did you haze it? Majority of the people said no. So if they saw a coyote, they chose not to haze it. If you see a coyote in the future, would you haze it? The majority of the people said yes. What does that mean? So what's interesting is, being a person who patrols at Crown Hill, I actually believe this is true. Education is a slow boil. It is not an overnight thing. Communities take a long time to accept new ideas and accept changes in behavior. And we did this study before we had to remove that bad actor coyote, so all this survey work was done before that animal started attacking dogs on leash. After that incident, what's interesting is people now say to me when I'm on patrol, I get it now. I understand why we need to treat the coyotes differently. Things didn't work out. So while some of this may be self-reporting, and that's the other thing that's interesting about social science, is people will tell you what you want to hear, except here, which is no. Social science of this is maybe people accept it after a while, or maybe it takes an event for people to accept the idea of hazing coyotes and whether that works or not. But we thought this was really interesting. Did the effort of the National Wildlife Researcher encouraging the public to haze coyotes influence whether or not you would do so? Yes, I am more likely to haze coyotes now. So does that answer make us feel good? Sure. Does it help us understand we have more work to do? Absolutely. That's why it's so exciting to see all of you here tonight, and I want to applaud you for investing an hour and a half of your life in educating yourselves about coyotes and coyote coexistence, because this is where it starts, and this is where it makes a difference, is residents getting engaged in the issue and educating themselves. So, last thoughts. I'm more likely to do it because you say it will help the coyotes, but it will be difficult because it seems mean. So this person's conflicted. I get it, but I don't really want to do it. I don't want anything bad to happen to the coyotes, so I'll scare them away. I'm more likely to haze them in order to protect them from humans. I thought that was a great comment. And this person at the bottom, I already knew all this, you people, but for those people who didn't already know it, they say, I haze the coyotes before the efforts, but I believe the effort would be worthwhile for the others who don't know what to do. On the other side of the fence, we had these comments. It does not work, and eventually we're going to see what's happened in other areas. Children have been bitten on public trails. Coyotes should be shot or transferred to another location. There's no need for them to be at this lake. And my problem with that last statement is there will always be coyotes at this lake.
Well, and if there were coyotes, you'd have a whole lot of other problems.
Correct. So the idea is, this is Crown Hill, this is great coyote habitat, there will always be coyotes at this lake. So you all here tonight, investing time in learning about coyotes means the world, because now we can be better ready to handle sharing Crown Hill, communities, whatever, with coyotes, and being safe as we do it and being sensible as we do it.